What's up, folks? This is Tony Brewer. You're listening to or watching, as the case may be, Cogitations. Cogitations is the podcast where we think about things, we contemplate them, we turn them over in our minds, and then we discuss them. Daniel chapter 7, verse 28, Daniel writes, "Hitherto is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my cogitations much troubled me. My countenance changed in me, but I kept the matter in my heart." Folks, we're not going to keep the matter in our heart. We're going to talk about it. And today we're going to talk about this listener question: authority in assembly. What about beyond Sunday morning? Do I have to come back on Wednesday night? Do I have to come back on Sunday night? Do I have to come back, or do I have to attend a Sunday morning Bible class before the worship service? These are all very good questions, and I used to be very jaded when it come to questions like this, because I always, and I just forgive me for this confession, but I was a little judgmental. I was like, well, it seems like people are just wanting to see how close they can get to the edge without going over and actually committing sin. But I don't think that's the case anymore. I think people are just trying to do the best they can. And John chapter 10, verse 10, Jesus says something very interesting. Jesus came that folks might have life, but not just that they might have life, but they might have it more abundantly. So one of the reasons Jesus sacrificed himself is so we could lead an abundant life. And I think in order to be charitable, loving, whenever folks ask questions like this, it needs to be answered and interpreted in the best possible light. And the way I interpret questions like, is so and so sinful, or must we do A and B? It's not people trying to see how close they can get to the edge without actually being in sin. It's about people wanting to know, I want to know how to live my full life in Christ while also doing everything that Jesus wants me to do because I love him. And so that's the way I thought about this question for today. Now, right before we get into the podcast, I want to do some administrative stuff. Getting a PO box is like a couple $100s a year, and I got to pay it up front. But there is a way for me to get a quote unquote digital PO box for free, and then I can give you that PO box number, and you can send to that PO box number, and when it gets to the post office, I'll get a notification that we have a package. That way I don't have to put my private home address out on the internet. But anyway, I haven't got that done. I stopped by the post office this morning to talk to the folks, and they were very helpful, and I will have that done hopefully by this afternoon. So you will be able to have access to a P.O. box where you can send Christianity Now stuff directly. Whether you send a letter asking a Bible question, whether you send monetary support, or whether you send, I know I joked a lot about A1 sauce, whether you send care packages from home. Anyway, that's all I've got about that. And if you like the show, if you like the content, the best thing that you can do to help us out is consume it. Consume the content, interact with it, share it. But make sure you just consume it. And if you like it, give us positive feedback. And if there's something you don't like, let us know that as well, because we want to do this for the audience. Good morning, Reginald Terry, Scott Beck, and Diana Harden. Diana Harden, me and my family are doing well. And hopefully everybody's doing well. Let me get the chat where I can see the chat out of the corner of my eye. All right, let's get into the podcast. Here is the question that I was sent. I'm going to read this. How would you respond to those who say, our only example is to worship on the first day of the week? We have some that don't come on Sunday night because that is their family time. Or they want us to have an intermission after morning service and then have a short second service so they don't have to come back on Sunday evening, which seems like a check the box type of thing to me. I can't figure out how family time wouldn't include worshiping with the brethren when we have a service scheduled. Am I looking at this wrong? I feel if the elders have a schedule to meet, they should be met. and people should want to. Now, this isn't a lot of folks, but just a few. I use scripture that talks about forsaking assembly and edification, which to me comes by being together. Anyway, just wanted to pick your brain. Thanks for any help. I still enjoy the podcast. Well, first off, this just tickles me tink. I absolutely love it. First off, no, you're not looking at this wrong. Yes, if the elders have convened and they have set this schedule, then we should be there when the elders say we should be there. And you are right. There are principles that can be used from Hebrews 10:25 about not forsaking the assembly of yourselves together, because we have to edify one another. And then I want to go to the other side and say these folks are also right as well, in that they have rightly concluded that there is only a mandate from God, a commandment from God, to meet one time a week on the Lord's Day for Sunday worship. That's the service in which liturgical service of the new covenant is performed with an involvement of the heart given to God with the proper attitude. That's what it takes for worship. We have to worship in spirit and in truth. In truth is doing the right thing. In spirit is involving the heart, having the right emotion, having the right object, having the right, I'm losing it here, intention. I don't know why I couldn't come up with intention. But anyway, so I want to cover this. I want to be balanced. And I did write the person a response, and I told him I wanted to cover this in tomorrow's podcast. So here we are. So the importance of addressing the concerns about attendance on Sunday evening and Wednesday night service is utmost. And we need to acknowledge that we need to be careful and carefully consider the church's authority and individual responsibilities. So first off, I do want to talk about the authority of the shepherds. Sunday night and Wednesday night meetings. Well, these services fall under the authority of the elders. And in lieu of elders, then authority is based on the mutual submission of one to another, as outlined or elucidated in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 21. Submit yourselves one to another. So the idea is, even in lieu of elders, the church can make decisions based on areas of expedience. Now, I will 100% admit a Sunday evening service and a Wednesday evening service and a Sunday morning Bible class are expediences. But what does that word expedient mean? Well, expedient, well, I tell you what, I don't know why let me pull out the dictionary here. E-X-P-E-D. Well, how do you spell E-X-P-E-D-I-E-N-T? All right, and we're going to do the dictionary. Expedient. It's as an adjective. It's describing an action. It's convenient or practical, although possibly improper or immoral. And it's also of an action suitable or appropriate. So holding a public inquiry into the scheme was not expedient, which means suitable or appropriate. A noun, the word expedient as a noun means it's a means of attaining an end, especially one is that convenient, but considered improper or immoral. I never knew it carried that. The origin of the word comes from the Latin expedient, which means putting in order, extricating, putting in order. Interesting. Let me tell you how I would explain expedient if I never looked it up in the dictionary, because I think I'm using it. I think we need to define it according to the Bible. And quite frankly, this is the Oxford English Dictionary, but it's a beta version, so it's not the full version. An expedient is something that is used to help us expedite a commandment of God. So we're commanded to study to show ourselves approved unto God, workmen that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth, 2 Timothy 2:15. So if we're to study to show ourselves approved, if we're to grow, if we're to give all diligence to add to our faith virtue, and to virtue on down those Christian virtues in 2 Peter, then we need to, as a group, as a community, as a congregation, expedite those commands. Like, for instance, when it comes to the Great Commission, we're told to uh, go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Well, how do we expedite that command? How do we expedite that commission? Well, in the 21st century, that means we take a plane, a train, an automobile. We don't have to do horses or camels or go on foot. We can go and we can expedite the command to go where 2,000 years ago I would have had to go by ship. Maybe I would have to walk several days to a port and then get on a ship and then go to a foreign nation that way. And it's much more difficult to carry out that command. But if I want to go to a foreign nation, I mean, even where we are, we can be in the United States in like 3 hours. That's going through the border as well. I figure about 30 minutes to get through the border. So we can be to the border in about 2.5 hours talking to the Border Patrol. So we expedite the Great Commission by using modern conveniences. What about the command to sing in a worship service? How do we expedite that? Well, an expediency would be songbooks, a PowerPoint projection that expedites the command to sing. It makes the command to sing easier. It helps us fulfill that command without changing the nature of the command. Like, for instance, we wouldn't add a piano because that is not an expedient, that is an addition. So when it comes to Sunday night and Wednesday night services, these services fall under the authority of the elders or the authority of the autonomous authority of the church. And each individual is subject to that authority. And again, the church is either led by an eldership or by a quorum of men in the absence or in lieu of elderships. So we have this authority. It is authoritative for a church to say, in order to expedite the command to preach the word, be instant in season, out of season, in order to expedite the command to edify the church, in order to expedite the command of feeding the flock of God, which he hath purchased with his own blood, feeding the church of God, which he has purchased with his own blood. In order to expedite those commands, we're going to have a Wednesday night Bible class, we're going to have a Sunday evening assembly, and we're going to have a Sunday morning Bible class before the worship. That is authoritative. Now, there is a need for balance, because the question becomes then, how far does the church want to take this? For instance, in discussing on whether the church should suffer long and allow members to come about in their own time, or do we confront and implement church discipline sooner rather than later? Folks, there is a balance. I, for one, am a fan of long suffering. Now, that doesn't mean we just let people get away with everything they want to get away with. But if you have a person that is missing on Wednesday night, missing on Sunday night, all they do is come to the Sunday morning worship, give them some time. Talk to them. Give them some time. Let them work that out. Let them come around. Explain to them why they need to be there. But give them some time. Now, if it goes from the room of they are just needing to learn and mature, and it leaves that room and goes from that room into the room of, well, I'm just not wanting to come because I don't want to come, well, then you must practice church discipline. That's just all there is to it. So we need to really understand Hebrews 10:25 here. Hebrews 10:25 is the verse that everybody goes to when it comes to convicting somebody of sin for missing a worship service or missing any service. Well, this verse applies specifically to the worship service where the new covenant's liturgical service is performed. I've got to be very specific here. There is one service that is special. It's on the Lord's Day. It's the assembling together of ourselves. Hebrews 10:25. Forsake not the assembling together of ourselves as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much more as you see the day approaching. I really need to read that from Hebrews because I feel like I messed it up. Hold on. Bear with me. Hebrews 10:25. Not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much more as you see the day approaching. Well, I didn't butcher it like I thought I did. So the idea here is Hebrews 10:25 is about this episunagoge. Episunagoge. It carries with it the idea of coming together in one place for a common purpose under the authority of something else. So we're there, we're led, and we're in one location. And that's commanded. You can't get out of it. If you stop coming to worship services, you're in violation. You can forsake the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some is by missing one worship service. Or it's very possible that you are not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some is, even if you miss 3 months of worship services. It all depends on the heart. It depends on intentions. Like, for instance, if somebody is sick and they're laid up in the hospital and they can't reasonably attend, they are not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some is. But if, like, I'm 46 years old, I'm in pretty good health, I'm just overweight. If I just wake up Sunday morning and say, you know what? I don't want to do this, and I skip, that one infraction, that one miss puts me into the realm of forsaking the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some is. But that verse applies specifically to the worship service. The requirement for worship is to be offered from a pure heart in spirit and in truth. And it has to have all of the liturgical service of the Lord's church, which is preaching, praying, Lord's Supper, singing. And then, of course, we use this assembly to give of our means. And once you do that, everything else is an expediency. So Sunday evening, expediency. Sunday morning Bible class, expediency. Wednesday evening Bible class, expediency. But that doesn't mean it's not required. It's just that Hebrews 10:25 is not the verse to use to apply leverage to people who refuse to come back. You have to go about it a different way. So I'm gotten a little bit ahead of myself with my notes. I want to address this argument for minimal attendance. Well, first off, let's acknowledge what I've already acknowledged, the acknowledgement of a single commanded meeting. These folks are arguing that we are only commanded to meet once, and that's on Sunday for worship. And it's true. That's technically true. But we need to also talk about rebellion against church authority. Because despite the technical correctness, the refusal to return for evening and midweek services constitutes rebellion. And such actions are in opposition to the authority of the local congregation. I want to read you something here from Hebrews 13. Now, in Hebrews 13, verse 17, it's obviously talking about an eldership. But remember, in lieu of an eldership, it's a quorum of men. And incidentally, even the eldership nor the quorum of men, they don't rule where God is already legislated. A lot of folks get that twisted. But let's read this. Obey them that have the rule over you, and submit yourselves, for they watch for your souls as they that must give account, that they may do it with joy and not with grief, for that is unprofitable for you. The principle here, now this is a principle, this isn't a mandate. I'm not pulling a verse out of its context and applying it in a way it wasn't intended. Because I'm going to talk about, before we wrap this up, the principle from Hebrews 10:25. Now, I can't go to Hebrews 10:17 and say that this quorum of men is as authoritative as an eldership. They're not. However, if it is the case, and it is, that Ephesians 5:21, we are to submit ourselves one to another, that means in the local congregation, each individual is to submit to the will of the congregation. That's like each individual elder is to submit to the authority of the eldership. Each individual is to submit to the authority of the congregation. In other words, one elder doesn't have authority. It's the authority of the eldership. One person doesn't have authority to rule in matters of expediency. It's the congregation as a whole, and that led by the quorum of men. The principle is you got to obey those. That if you rebel against that authority, you're in open rebellion to God. And that is sinful. So even though it's technically correct that Hebrews 10:25 doesn't apply to a Wednesday night service, a Sunday evening service, or the Sunday morning Sunday school meeting, if you willfully miss those and you have no good reason and the church is telling you they want you there, you need to be there, then you are in danger of eternal damnation. Even though you are not technically in violation of an established law, you're in violation of the authoritative will of the local congregation and the elderships. And the person that sent me this question, they are functioning under an eldership. So like I said, just because it's technical, and Hebrews 10:25, it is technically correct that Hebrews 10:25 only requires one meeting on Sunday. To forsake the other meetings is not to be in violation of Hebrews 10:25, but it's to be in violation of the local autonomous authority of the church. And you need to repent and you need to change. Now, how does this look practically? Well, you might say, well, Tony, on Wednesday, I have to work from 7 in the morning to 7 in the evening. So I work a 12-hour day, and worship service or Bible class is at 7 p.m. Well, it's a 30-minute drive from work. I'm going to miss the Bible study. I'm just going to interrupt everybody walking in 30 to 45 minutes late. Well, then you probably don't need to attend. You need to let people know why. You need to let the church know why. And then you need to make arrangements to make up that time. Like, what are you doing other than the Wednesday night Bible class? So it's very possible that you get together with the church and be like, hey, I do have Thursday evenings free. Can a few of y'all come over my house on Thursday evening and we can eat pork rinds and hot sauce and study the Bible? That's perfectly acceptable. Or you can go to the elders and the church and be like, hey, look, I have this work schedule. I can't work around it. And I need to be missing on Wednesday nights for the foreseeable future. It's not ideal. I'm working to not have it so. So what can I do? Can you help me? Don't come in like you're telling. Remember, you're under the authority of the local congregation. And as weird as this sounds, you need to ask permission. Now, the permission should be granted because the bar for reasonableness is very low. That's just all there is to it. The bar for reasonableness is very low. So if somebody comes in, like Sunday rolls around, you go to one of the elders and say, hey, listen, at work, we got this woman, she's having surgery and I've got to take her place, and she works from Instead of 6 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon, she works from 4 in the afternoon till, we'll say, midnight. I'm not going to be able to make Wednesday night service. Is that okay? Well, absolutely that's okay. We're not your taskmasters. We're watching for your soul, and we know that you can pull that proverbial ox out of the ditch and your soul will be fine. So we handle the Sunday evening, the Wednesday evening, and the Sunday morning Bible class a little differently than an actual worship service. Now, here's the thing. When it comes to the worship service, when it comes to the Episynagoge, you can't get permission to miss. If you miss, you have to have a good reason. You have to have a reason that you're willing to explain to Jesus while he's on the cross. Here's why I say it like that. I woke up this morning, I had a little bit of a headache, so I didn't go to worship service. So it's too much of a chore to go to a building and sit in an auditorium where songs are sung, the Lord's Supper is partaken, prayers are made, sermons, all this. It's too much of a chore because of your little headache. Jesus is up there on the cross. He's bloody and broken and bleeding. Tell him it's too much of a chore just to drive down the road a little piece and go to church while you have a headache. Do you see how quickly some of that rationale behind missing just fades away? But that being said, if you miss, let folks know. The congregation, we are our brother's keeper. So you need to let folks know why you're there. And incidentally, if you miss and then nobody calls you and you sull up and you say, well, those people didn't want me there anyway, so you miss again. Don't just sit there silently expecting somebody to call you. You pick up the phone. It's your responsibility. You pick up the phone and you call somebody and you say, hey, I just want to let you know that I've been out of pocket for XYZ reason, and I've got it straight, and I'm gonna be back next Sunday. We got a woman here in Riverview that she broke her hip and she's rehabbing. Man, she ain't going nowhere. So she ain't been to worship service in months. We understand that. She'll be back when she can. It's typically not an issue, but both the leadership of the congregation and the congregation need to understand what accountability is. So, if you miss a Sunday night, a Wednesday night, a Sunday morning Bible class, that's not a violation of Hebrews 10:25, but it absolutely could be sin because you're in open rebellion against God, because you're rebelling against his ordained authority on earth. And then when it comes to the worship service, you can forsake the assembling of yourselves together, as the manner of some is, if you only miss one time, if your attitude is wrong. But if you have to miss for 3 or 4 months in a row, if the reason is beyond your control, then you're not guilty of forsaking the assembling of yourselves together. But one thing that cannot happen, you cannot go to the eldership and say, listen, I'm going to take a job where I'm working from 7 in the morning till 7 at night on Sunday. So I'm not going to be able to worship. I'm just going to not come. They can't give you permission to do that. You need to look closer at Matthew 6:33 about seeking first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. And if you're taking that shift on Sunday to make extra money, maybe you just need to trust God that he'll take care of your means if you seek first his kingdom. Because the elders can't give you permission. And so often people take jobs, and the excuse that they give is, well, I can't come worship with the saints because they would fire me from my job. Maybe if you took a stance, they wouldn't. Maybe if you said, listen, I would love to be a doctor or a nurse or whatever. And my hard line is, I don't work on Sunday, at least during this block of time. Now, you may have to come to worship with the saints in your scrubs. You may have to come to worship with the saints with your police uniform, but you take a stance. Do we not understand that we'll have to give something up if we're going to follow Jesus? And it may be that you have to give up your favorite career. But if enough people took hard stances, then Christianity would have the respect in society that if they hire a Christian, they know that that Christian is not going to be available during normal meeting times. So we must adhere to the authority of the local church. That is of utmost importance. And we need to address the issue with a balanced approach and consider both the long suffering that is commanded and the need for discipline. And there's one other thing that I thought of as I was going through this. Let's go to Acts chapter 2. And I want to read 42 through 47. This is not verses I read a whole lot. So, well, I'm just going to start reading the last paragraph of the chapters, 41 through 47. And after I read this and make this point, I'm going to go to the comment section. I hope I've answered the viewers or listeners' question adequately and reasonably. Then they that gladly received his word were baptized, and the same day were added unto them about 3,000 souls. And they continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine and fellowship, and in breaking of bread, and in prayers. And the fear came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were done by the apostles. And all that believed were together, and had all things in common, and sold their possessions and goods, and parted them unto all men, as every man had a need. And they continued daily with one accord in the temple, and breaking bread from house to house, did eat their meat with gladness and singleness of heart, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to the church daily such as should be saved. These people understood what it meant to be together. There was something that the listener said in his question. He says, I use scripture that talks about forsaking assembly and edification, which to me means coming together, which comes by coming together. This questioner gets it. We are edified, we are built up, we are strengthened by being together. Even in Mark chapter 3, Jesus posed the question, who are my sisters and my brothers? Who is my mother? Who is my father? Who is my family? It's all of you people sitting here. Think about that. It's all of you folks who are wanting to do the will of God. You know, when it comes to family time, that is your family. I've never understood how people can have that attitude. But anyway, so I just wanted to make that point from Acts 2:42 and following. So to sum up, it is technically correct that we are only commanded to meet one time a week, and that's on Sunday for worship service. But the other meeting times fall under the purview of the autonomous authority of the congregation, which is either overseen by a quorum of men or an eldership. And if we just decide we're not going to come back on Wednesday night, Sunday night, if we're not going to come to Sunday morning Bible class, we could be in danger of losing our soul and being damned for eternity because we're in open rebellion to God, because we are rebelling against his ordained authority on earth. And the decision to be made at that point by the church is, do we want to bear long and suffer long? Or do we want to have that confrontation and start the process of church discipline? Let's go to the comment section. Good to see everybody. All right, let's see what we've got here. All right. Terry Crooks is in. Good morning. Good morning, John Exum. And John Exum asks, how can brethren know you love them if you don't want to be around them? That's a good question. 1 John 3:18, little children, let us not love with word or tongue only. I added the only because it's an ellipsis. It's there. Let us not love with word or tongue, but in deed and truth. Yeah, don't, if all you do is just tell me you love me, but you never do anything, you don't act lovingly toward me, you don't really love me. Your words are useless. Which John's next comment illustrates that. What if I told my wife I love you, but I only wanted to be around her once a week? Is that a faithful husband? Well, absolutely not. And here's another. This is a quotation, I think. One does not come to the assembly simply because of a command. One does not earn anything by showing up. We come together to honor and worship God and to edify one another. Peter wrote about sincere brotherly love, and that is shown more than it is. Oh, that is shown more than it is said. I remember what Gus Nichols said when he said, "Once I made the decision, the question has not come up as to whether I would attend church services or not. In fact, I did not decide last Lord's Day to go to worship nor the Sunday before. That decision was made more than 50 years ago." And what he's alluding to there, when he obeyed the gospel, when he was baptized into Christ and raised again to walk in newness of life, the decision of what he was doing when the assembling of ourselves, whenever we were assembled together, I'll get it out in a minute. He says, I'm going to be with the Lord's church. It reminds me, quite frankly, of a verse in, I can't remember now. Joshua. I had this written down. It was Joshua. Okay. And if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Joshua 24:15. Whenever you obey the gospel, you answer that clarion call. Here am I, send me. You have become a soldier in the Lord's army. Your will is no longer your own. First off, as far as the Sunday morning worship, for the rest of your life, you know what you're doing on Sunday. In fact, assembling together with the saints is your excuse to miss other things. Other things are not an excuse to miss that. Good quote there. Good comment there, John. Yeah, you have good comments all the time. I'm just saying that was a good one. All this to say, coming together with the brethren should not be a question in the mind of a Christian. The norm ought to be, I'm going to be with my brethren unless things beyond my control happen and I cannot. Yes. Is there a difference between assembling and assembly? And does that make a difference in Hebrews 10:25? It depends on how pedantic you want to get. Grammatically, in order to be consistent with the grammar of the Greek, that is a gerund phrase, and a gerund is typically noted by the verb ending in ing. Like, I am talking. Well, that's the verb. It's not a gerund, even though it ends in ing. But if I said, forgive my talking to you, talking would be a gerund. It would actually, the word there would be a noun. It's a verb used as a noun. Gerund. All right? Talking to you. That would be the gerund phrase, talking to you. And that phrase, when you diagram that sentence, that phrase would be considered a noun. Well, the assembling of ourselves together, assembling together is a noun, and of ourselves is a prepositional phrase, and that creates the gerund phrase, assembling of ourselves together. And so the assembly, if it says, forsake not the assembly, I think that would change, and it may only change it in a technical way. But I know that the assembling of ourselves together, the reason it's written that way is to be consistent with the grammar in the Greek, because you have to translate. You cannot swap parts of speech. In other words, you can't translate a Greek noun into an English verb, or you can't translate an English or a Greek verb into an English noun. It's got to be a 1-for-1, at least in the part of speech. That may have muddied the water, but that would be my answer. Is there a difference between assembling and assembly? Yes. And does that make a difference in Hebrews 10:25? If so, minimal. I mean, forsake not the assembly of the church. I don't know. I'd have to chew on that more, John, now that I've talked through it. All right. I know some men who try to show up once worship starts so they don't have to serve. Opening prayer, communion prayer. That's weird. I would even question, like, that ought to be handled before you come to service. People ought to know what their role is before they come. But if that's the reason why they're coming in late, that's a pretty sorry reason. Just be man enough to say no. You know, if I'm going to come to worship service, and if I don't feel like I want to lead prayer, somebody asks me to lead prayer, I'm just going to say no, thank you. I appreciate you asking. It's weird. Seems like some hold to the unum sola assembly. One assembly alone, the six sola. Yeah, I think so. For me and my household, we need more godly men who are in charge of their family and their service to God. Amen, sister. You know, the Pew Research, they did research, and it's not on just the churches of Christ, it's on every religious organization. But the statistics on conversion, like for instance, if a child in the house obeys the gospel, it's less than 1% that the parents follow. If the mother in the house obeys the gospel, it's like single digits percent that the husband and the children obey the gospel. But if the husband obeys the gospel, the percentage is close to 100 that the family follows. And I've got an article that I haven't released because I don't know, man. It might make a bunch of people mad. But the article is about how we've catered to women too much in the church. We have feminized the church and catered it to women so that men are uncomfortable. All of the traits that men have, we have stripped men of being able to act like men, and we have sissified Jesus to the point where any trait of masculinity is considered toxic. Therefore, it's considered ungodly, and we make this panty-waist feminine Jesus, and we hold him up as an example for men to be. So if you got a man that has any kind of a backbone, he's ousted from the fellowship. We need to cater to men more. We have our church has gone gynocentric, just like our society has gone gynocentric. Give me Christ, but not the church, some say. Yeah. And you know how that'd be like, John Exum, I really like you, but man, I can't stand your arm. So you can hang around me and I'll be friends with you, but I don't want to have any kind of association with your arm. That's just weird. Have you heard any good reason why church attendance dropped so much after COVID? It gave people do what they're practiced at doing. People do what they are practiced at doing. And what COVID did, it created a habit. And now we have people who created this habit of quote unquote worshiping at home. Now, you can absolutely worship at home. There's nothing wrong with it. But, and I need to make me a graphic. Think about Congregation A, Congregation B, and Congregation C. Congregation A live streams their worship service. You've got Congregation B, so Congregation A is in Tennessee, Congregation B is in Mississippi, and Congregation C is in Alabama. Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama. Congregation B and Congregation C can watch the live stream of Congregation A, but that does not mean And they can use the live stream of Congregation A in order to facilitate a worship service in their separate locations. But that does not mean that corporate worship was had between congregations A, B, and C, because they're not in the same place. It does not meet the minimum requirements for the episynagoge, the assembling of ourselves together. And the problem is, whenever people try to clear things up and use specific language, they get made fun of, saying that, well, you're just speaking, it's just semantics now. No, there is no such thing as a virtual worship service. A virtual worship service will feed you like virtual food and warm you like virtual fire. It's worthless. If me and my family are sitting at home and we're watching a live stream, we are absolutely worshiping and participating in corporate worship, but we are not participating in corporate worship with the people on the television. So we are not fellowshipping with that congregation in that way. And we had so many people speak and describe reality in language that was not commensurate with said reality. So now we have created this lie, this delusion that people buy into, and they think, well, I'm a member of the Smith Street Church of Christ, and I love the Smith Street Church of Christ. Well, when's the last time you've been to the building? Well, I haven't been to the building since COVID hit because of germs, and we're afraid. But we're worshiping there, and I'm a member there because I worship with them every Sunday right from my living room. Folks, that's delusional. That is not true. You might be worshiping, but you're not part of that congregation. You might be fulfilling the minimum requirements of Hebrews 10:25, but you're not a part of that congregation. And so we've developed this habit of staying home. We've normalized it, so that's why the attendance hasn't recovered. Tony, I don't think you're afraid to teach on any subject, and that's a good thing. You're correct. I am not afraid. I've been holding on to this article because I am scared, or afraid might not be the right word. I just know the backlash that could potentially come. Is virtual worship seen? Is virtual worship even worship? And will a televised fireplace provide me warmth? No and no. Elohim gave all to us. Why do we give minimum? Yeah, societal nonsense has snuck in on several fronts. Absolutely, Ben Grady. And I love to watch online services from other congregations, but I watch them after my regular service with my home congregation. Absolutely. And Connie, let me get you off here. I got you on blast. Right there. Okay. And Connie, I will say this, I want to put you on blast again. You're on the hot seat. Here's the deal. If for some reason you had the proverbial ox in the ditch scenario, and you couldn't worship with the saints at your local congregation, your home congregation, you could absolutely watch a worship service and fulfill the requirements of Hebrews 10:25 in your own home, giving that special circumstance. And to further illustrate, though, you wouldn't be worshiping, quote unquote, with the congregation that you're watching on TV. Even when we were assembled in part, separated, masked, utterly disconnected, that was bad enough. But live stream service was just utter nonsense. It has its place and benefits when someone is sick or legitimately cannot make it, or being able to share the message. But it does not qualify as worship. Yeah, one of the stupidest things I've ever seen is somebody trying to have a song service on a Zoom meeting. I'm just like, what in the world? What they ended up doing was everybody muted, and the quote-unquote song leader sung the song, and everybody sang, but they were only singing individually, and they were singing along to the song leader. And I'm like, y'all think y'all are doing congregational singing? You poor delusional spirits. You poor delusional souls. Anyway, so I think we're done. We're going about 50 minutes. The original question had to do with, is it a requirement to come back on Wednesday night, Sunday night? The answer is yes, but Hebrews 10:25 is not the verse you use to prove it. You establish congregational authority, and if somebody doesn't come back on Sunday night and Wednesday night, they're in open rebellion to God because they're in open rebellion to the autonomous authority of the congregation. Now, the question is, how do you deal with it? Because it's an expediency, you have the right to forbear. But the long suffering can run out, and you can practice church discipline. In some cases, that may be what you need to do. Folks, I appreciate so much every one of you. Remember, I'm going to have to go on the Canadian Post website to set up that virtual P.O. box so y'all can send me stuff, the folks that have asked. But if you want to support the show, man, the best way to do, well, first off, there's one of the good ways to do it is send me Bible questions for show topics and questions. Send an email to www.christianityisnow@gmail.com. www.christianityisnow@gmail.com. Consume the content, ask Bible questions, or do show ideas. If you send me an email, if we don't make a dedicated show out of it, I will work it into a Free for All Friday, which we're having Free for All Friday tomorrow. So that's awesome. Another way to support the show, consume the content, and on YouTube, go to YouTube and hit the like button. Hit the like button. Make sure you're subscribed. Give us a subscribe on Substack. And if you want to support the show monetarily, there's ways to do that. We do have a tip jar. That's PayPal, nearchurches@gmail.com. You can send monetary donations to PayPal. You can do super chats and super thanks on the YouTube. And other than that, look at the show notes, and all the ways to support us will be in there. Thank you so much. Oh, let me get this one more comment. When our elders dismissed services for 3 weeks because of COVID, which I didn't agree with, I watched a service and took the Lord's Supper with them in my home, but it was greatly lacking. Yes, and that's the thing. Understand that this is suboptimal. It is lacking, and you're not actually, quote unquote, with them because you're not in the same location. You're by yourself using a video manifestation and representation of them as a guide. That's the big thing to remember about, quote unquote, virtual services or virtual or online worship. Anyway, that's all we've got here, folks. Tony Brewer with Cogitations. Like, subscribe, and share. Go to Apple Podcast, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, and Podbean for the archive. We'd love for you to subscribe there. And that's all I've got. Man, there's another, yeah, we didn't meet for the longest period. Met in thirds and halves for other periods. Then when they said not to sing for 5 weeks, they just said we have to obey the government and didn't sing for 5 weeks. A lot of sad stuff. They made a claim that we were in the same location online. Yeah, you're not. That's the problem. No matter how you slice it, you are not in the same location. In order to, we are triune beings. Mind, body, spirit. When I'm looking at a live stream, my mind, body, and spirit is not where those people are. That means staying home just because I don't want to go and watching a service online that's in violation of Hebrews 10:25, the episynagoge. We're not there together. We're not coming together in one place. I think that's 1 Corinthians 11:20. Oh, Connie, yeah, the bars and strip clubs stayed open. That's what burnt me. That's what burnt me. I got to stop. We'll just keep going forever. Thank you so much, folks. You know all the stuff. Cogitations on Apple Podcast, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, and then give us a subscribe and a like on YouTube. God bless. We'll see you tomorrow for Free for All Friday. God bless.